Epic has finally brought back the most fun tournament, the Duos Victory Cash Cup. And in this tournament, all you need to do is place top 400 in the opens 2 hours and then win a game in the finals to earn $100 each. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a full breakdown of how Vico and Malibuca play duos as a brand new formed duo and exactly how they won a game in finals. I'll be breaking down all of their strats, early, mid game, as well as exactly how to rotate endgames and partial zones this season, just for you guys. Please leave a like and let's get straight into this with the early game. Alright, so for our spawn, Malibuca and Vico are landing at Evergreen Terrace, and as you can probably tell, this spot is very conned, and something that is so important for tournaments this season, guys, is to not die off spawn. And these guys take this to another level. As soon as they land and they realize it's a little bit over conned, they are basically just instantly disengaging and getting out of the POI and not even risking shooting or fighting other players, because of course you don't want to get third partied. But opens, especially now the game's been about 22 minutes long, as well as in the finals where a win is all you need to do to earn, it's very important that you don't risk dying off spawn, and instead you should disengage if you're overcon and try to find a better fight during the mid game. You're not going to get third partied as much. Alright, now for early mid game, there's basically two main things that I'd recommend that you guys should be doing during the early mid game. Number one is obviously make sure you're not taking an unnecessary fight, but also along those lines is be very disciplined of where you're looting up and not getting greedy with looting. Try to get as many chests as possible, so obviously you get good heals and you get good mobility and better gun upgrades, which they're sort of lacking here. But don't get so greedy where you're running into other POIs, you're running into other spots where you're going to fight people. These guys, as they come into Springfield right here, they know there's of course going to be teams. However, they're just taking a little side of it. They're not getting greedy. They're not risking taking damage and getting pushed. Instead, they're just scrap looting up, getting a decent loadout while they start looking for some potential keys during their mid game. And when it comes to the selection of how they actually take these fights, it is so important that you guys learn how they sort of approach taking fights. They never push into a fight unless they have a free kill to begin with and they're setting themselves up into a 2v1. So here, they take out the player rebooting, and of course, they're going to push over and try to find the other player. And it's so important when you're fighting this season, guys, even if you're just trying to wipe out a solo, is you need to be very disciplined with not taking damage, right? Right here, they've only got 4 burgers that don't have any big shields, don't have any extra heals. It's very little team heals, there's only chug splashes. So you've got to be super careful about taking unnecessary damage. They're blocking all the angles. When Vico finally does find the player, he does a nice sliding peek in, catches them off guard, and now these guys are looking a little bit better. But of course, they're not in a good zone positioning. So let's talk about that next. Now for zone positioning, probably the biggest mistake people make is playing Storm either too late or too early. So you can see right here, we've got a bunch of people trying to play Storm, trying to get reboots off. That's completely understandable. But there's other teams that are putting themselves in an awkward spot early, rather than just focusing on being early into zone and then having the optionality of playing Storm later. So I'm going to explain exactly how Mali and Vico use this to actually win games in the finals that you guys can learn from. The first thing they do is they're not faffing around, they're not wasting too much time. They're just getting themselves into zone, as you can see right here, despite having loads of medkits where they could play Storm. The reason for that is there's no reason for them to double back into Storm. They're cat mats, they've got good heals. You want to try to get ahead of other people and get yourself a little bit further in. And this season, there's only 4 of these early game zones where they just shrink in over and over. So if you can get nice and center, let's say like right here, or even right here, you're basically guaranteed to pull the next couple zones. And that's exactly what happens. You can see where I marked with guaranteed pull zone, and these guys end up putting themselves in a nice spot where again, they're going to start pulling zones. A big thing as well is do not be afraid of just burning through wood to avoid wasting your shield early. Like right here, these guys obviously could just stop and go AFK or stop, you know, where they're at right now. They could just stop, but it's better to burn your wood, get more deep into the center of zone, and also try to put yourself in a spot where of course you can refarm your wood later. So they're not afraid of burning through their wood and also not wasting their big shields early because they can smash up in a second. And of course you can refarm your wood very easily this season. It's really important because the game's paced a lot quicker. You don't faff around, you don't waste as much time during the early mid game, which is exactly what these guys are trying to do. Another big thing is make sure you try to look for opportunistic moments where you can actually get way more stacked and can set yourself up with a win condition. So right here, as you can see, that's exactly what happens. They spot a third party, obviously sneaking on it, crouching up on it, and they spot a knocked body. And this knocked body isn't necessary for them right now. As you can see, like, you know, they don't actually need it. They can maybe get a big or small splashes, but it is so good to play a little bit greedy when you have an opportunity like this, just so you can get yourself as stacked as possible. So let's watch how they approach and how they play out this fight, and also how they kill the other duo this team is fighting as well. So the very first thing that these guys do as they approach the fight, and this should be really important for you guys, is first of all, they make sure they're full HP, so they don't risk getting one pumped or getting one rangered, which is quite a common shotgun choice in duos. They just get themselves back up to full HP and they throw the body back, which is so important. Look at Malibuca. He throws the body back, he makes loads of space right through here. Now all of these are his edits and they're also out of the enemy edits. So this means if that guy's duo was to come over and try to fight for the reboot, or if that other team was to come over and try to fight them, they can have a load of their edits and their control that they can work from, which is going to become very important in a second. Next thing that Vico does is he tarps, makes some extra space for the spare mats. And you'll notice as well, he's tarping towards the center of zone, since that's obviously, guaranteed to pull zone. Malibuca's even marked exactly where the center is. They know, if we go that way, we're going to guarantee pull zone. And the other team starts aggressing them right here. So let's watch Vico. Obviously, he's a bit more, flashy, mechanical. First thing that Vico does is he waits for the double pickaxe on his wall. And these guys are obviously now, expecting the edit to come out. And he just does an insta edit when the other guy is blocking him. I don't know if this is intentional, but this guy's obviously swinging in, trying to get the pickaxe replaced. And now Vico's insta editing, making it so he can't hit the wall with this edit selection. Hits 100 onto one of them and immediately goes up and starts aggressing towards the top on the other player. Then, using all the edits that they had from earlier, all the builds that Malibuca placed to make it secure, they crack the other player as well, just like that. And now they're in this very, very easy spot where they've got a load of damage, but unfortunately, Malibuca gets hit down to low HP. So what does Malibuca do? Immediately backs up, goes into this old build that they had from earlier, plays a nice right-hand peek, blocks off the other player right there, and now they're in a situation where they're in a 1v1 once again. What does Vico do? Pickaxe swing, holds out his pump, hits a max until the player. Other guy did max him, to be fair. In that situation, we've done that much damage, and you 200 HP, getting on the wall and then just holding your pump out is probably the best play in that scenario. At this point in the time, as you guys can see, these guys have absolutely game-winning loot. Just from that one simple body that they got, as well as that double refresh from that team that tried to key them, they're now completely chilling for the rest of the game. And of course, they're going to be very disciplined with using their mats. All right, now probably the most commonly asked question that I get asked this season is just how do you rotate these partial zones when everyone is around you, everybody's shooting you in the back, and it's just very, very scuffed. And of course, the answer to that is to not be in spots like all of these other players. Let's just zoom in on the map real quick, and you can see, so green is where Mali and Vico are, as well as, let's do in red, where all these other teams are. There's even a team way back there for some reason. All these other teams are congested on this backside. Zone just pulled, as you can imagine, zone just pulled in like this. You need to make sure when zone shrinks in like that, you don't end up on edge. Even if it costs you a little bit more mats, you don't want to be sitting on edge, because suddenly you're now going to have an issue where there is, Malibuca and Vico's team here, there's two teams right here, there's a team right here, there's a team right here, there's a team right there, as well as there's all of those red teams on the backside that can potentially hold you if, unfortunately for you, you get another zone pull that pulls all the way over here, right? Which is probably what's going to happen, since whenever you're on congested side, zone always tends to pull back. So you guys need to avoid being in these situations where you're on the super congested backside of zone like all these other teams. And how do Malibuca and Vico avoid this? Well, first of all, is they had a load of extra mats, they tarped in extra far, and they also make sure as soon as the zone pulls, they go even further in. And obviously you're not going to have cat metal just sitting in your box. So in a real game, what you can do is instantly rotate and, try to get to a tree. So let's say you're on this team, you're in a really bad spot, so you try to avoid being in that spot to begin with. You can do a nice simple rotate, pause on the tree. Maybe if you're here, you can do a nice simple rotate, pause to there, trying to get some old builds that you can mirror. You need to break up your rotates into those little chunks. You're not just sitting backside with a max pull next to everybody else. And of course, you want to try to avoid being in those spots to begin with. Now, of course, I'm not just going to show you guys a game where these guys are completely stacked. What ends up happening here, Vico goes down to 10 HP, Malibuca gets cracked as well, and these guys are now in a very, very difficult spot, and they get keyed by a team mid-rotate. So even if you have like perfect, rotates, timings, figuring out exactly what's going on, this season you can still get absolutely beamed. All it takes is one team with the purple infantry and good aim, and suddenly you're down to 1 HP getting keyed by another team. What do these guys do when they get keyed right here is they make a load of space. They basically just burn through all their mats. They also layer change a bunch. So Vico goes down here, he goes back away from this other team as well, and these guys quickly just splash up and they start looking to fight back versus this other team that's keying them. These other teams keying them, what does Malibuca do? Very smartly, he exits out the box to the left, does a right hand peek back like this, gets a little bit of chip damage, and that chip damage lets this other team know that they're not keying some absolute drones, and now these guys are able to fully heal up. But of course, now they are very, very scuffed. They're not in the best situation for mats, and they still have a very, very tough rotate ahead of them. So one big skill that I think this season is really good for practicing is just how to rotate when the situation is tough, like you're in a really difficult spot. And this is something that Malibuca is obviously very, very good at. He's a very good solo player, same thing with Vico. And the first thing you need to do when you're in a difficult spot, your backside, there's a team maybe trying to grief you or shoot you, is you need to overbuild your mats. It's probably the mistake they made earlier, is they didn't build enough of their mats, assuming they had like good priority on other people because they were a little bit further ahead. They didn't build enough, and it ended up getting them punished and using all of their materials trying not to die, as well as a good bit of their heals. So there, they invest a bunch of materials getting in, blocking their backs to make sure they don't get tagged anymore, and they mirror through this building here. And you need to be very, very careful careful when you're going through a build like this, that you try to get back some of your mats as you come into the zone. Obviously, don't do it last seconds. You're rotating in the very, very last minute, but these guys refarm a little bit of their mats, just a little bit of their brick back, both of them here, and they're able to rotate in. And now this rotate, even though it was scuffed at the beginning, has ended up becoming very, very cheap because they're able to rotate in using the extra brick that they just refarmed. As you can see, they get their brick back and they use it straight away, and once again they get another very, very difficult pull. And unfortunately for them, as well as the exact moment they get a difficult pull and they start scout it, they get pre-edited by another team. Alba right here drops him down. Vico almost dies. He does the correct play, which is getting damage and then just getting straight out the box. He's not like aim dueling right there. And these guys, just because they got a little bit of damage off, they don't get keyed and they manage to get themselves out of the box. But again, very, very difficult zone. All right, so clearly Malibuca is the IGL of this duo. And if you guys are an IGL, I want you to go in the comments and just write how you would do this rotate. I'll go drone free and scout it. So as you can see, they are on congested side. Unfortunately, what we were talking about trying to avoid has happened to them. They've ended up on a really busy spot with everybody else ahead of them, and they have to rotate over and through all of these other teams max distance. So I want you guys, if you're an IGL, comment how you would do this rotate. I'll go drone free for a second. What type of timings would you look for? What type of, rotate path? Would you drop down left here? Would you try going up? Would you go through this old top down on low? Would you maybe chop through the building? There's a couple different choices, and I think Malibuca makes a really, really good choice. So I'll pause it for a second, 5 seconds or so. Go down in the comments, write how you would do this rotate. Again, this is drone free, so you can see that in this box right here, very, very difficult zone pull is pulling max through congested side, and these guys have no mobility to do it, and they end up doing this rotate very, very cleanly and also getting a refresh on the way. So now you guys have written it in the comments. Hopefully if you're an IGL, don't just skip out and be lazy. What do these guys do for their rotate? First thing they do is they focus on trying to go a little bit late. They want some other players to build for them. As you can see, now a few more players have built. They know that this team has left, which is really important. If this team hadn't left, it'd be a very, very difficult rotate indeed. They also know there's now a few more people down on here. There's also some other people on this right hand side that are mirroring through those old builds. They know probably the best choice here is to go up towards this tower. As you can see, Malibuca goes up, he blocks his head just to make sure there's not a team camping up there, and then he ends up getting to a much better spot where he can now pause to get some surge, because actually below surge at this point in time, as well as really crucially get a better view of how they're going to do this rotate. It's so important, guys. Hopefully if you wrote in the comments, you should have realized that where they were at right here, they couldn't actually have vision. They couldn't actually see the rest of the rotate, right? Because there was a big building and the big tower blocking them. So what they did very, very smartly is they got themselves into this big tower right here. Now they can get some damage. You can see they're able to get some tags and get above surge. Get some more tags on these teams they rotate past. And now very, very clearly, just from this better vision point that they've got up here, they're able to rotate basically completely for free and following all these other players. All these other players going a little bit early, not wanting to go all the way late. They're able to avoid running into other people where they get shotgunned in the back and stuff. And they're able to rotate and basically follow these other players and their builds completely for free right here. I also absolutely love the play that Malibuca does right here. Is he spots that this guy gets cracked. He's following behind him as he gets pumped in the back. He makes sure not to actually fight this team. He just gets a little bit of tag to scare them off, and he starts aggressing the wall right here. And this is so smart. He aggresses the wall, gets some mats, not a crazy amount of mats, but just gets a little bit of mats, as well as gets some burgers. And Vico also gets the extra mats, and that little bit of a refresh has now stacked them up on hard mats, so they can actually get into the end of this zone. Again, it's not a kill that he got. He just shot the team and cracked the team that actually got the kill, and now they're able to rotate in again for free. And just like earlier, they're not going to make the mistake of going in down on low. They're not going to make the mistake of dropping in on these other layers. Instead, they're going to use the hard mats they just got off that have refresh that they stole, and they're able to go up, make sure they're fully connected, and get themselves into a nice high layer spot right here where they can now have an easy rotate for the next zone. It's so important. You've got a really difficult zone. Don't just sit down on low ground hoping it's going to become better, right? You need to make sure you put yourself in a better spot. You can actually scout out where you're going to rotate to. All right, now we are finally into the end game, and these guys aren't in the best way. They've only got like 1,000 mats. Their heals are pretty good, but obviously could be better, and they sort of need to find some type of win condition rather than just trying to play out their mats and finding a shambles refresh later. And that's exactly what they do right here. Malibuca starts scouting. He comms to Vico exactly what their play is going to do on this zone pool right here. Again, pretty similar to earlier, trying to go up and over, and they spot a perfect opportunity in a second right here with this other player peeking over the top as he's right here. This guy gets a little bit greedy, over peeks a little bit too hard, looking like resub right there. His knees are out the box, as you guys can see. Never ever peek with your knees out the box, guys. That is rule number 1 of Fortnite to avoid, and they take him out straight away. And just like that, they've got a refresh, but one refresh alone isn't good enough at this point in the game because they're still very, very shambles, as you can see. So what do? Vico very smartly realizes where this team is boxed up, where the other guy is likely to be, you know, trying to get the extra mats that his teammate is dropping, and where is he going to exit to, and what does he do? He pickaxes, doesn't even bother replacing. Malibuca's pressuring from the other way, you know, making this guy get distracted, walks in, little max, and just like that, these guys are cat mats going into first moving. Now, probably the biggest mistake that people make in endgames at the moment, I would say, is try to play for height and use it too early. And the main reason that's a big mistake is right there because of the crusty blaster. You get sent up into the air and it's super risky playing up on height. And these guys, they're not really sure, you know, who's actually playing with the crusty blaster. They're not really sure what's going on. So what do? They drop down, they layer change all the way down, and they basically just give up height completely for free. They realize height is not worth the risk of getting sent up into the air by a team they're not really sure where they are at. And instead, they just play mid ground. And they know that mid ground, especially high layer mid ground, is the meta this season. It's 100% the best way to have good end games. It's just playing a high mid ground style. You have nice cost effective rotates, and oftentimes when zones bounce back like they do right here, is you're able to have really, really cheap mat rotates compared to the team that's established up on the height. And as soon as the zone bounces back right here, these guys start crouching around, which is so important. A lot of people have started to catch on to this. This is basically just the meta for getting refreshes, is rather than being super active and spraying and shooting your gun loads, instead double crouch, sneak around, and a refresh will come to you. As you can see, happens right here. This guy's getting pieced up. He has no idea where these two are, and instead they get a nice free refresh just like that, and they're able to grab the mats as well and some nice heals. And the first thing that Malibuca does after getting that refresh, I don't know if you guys caught it right there, is as soon as he gets that refresh, is he tarped a little bit and made some extra space for them to go into in a second. Really, really good display by him. As soon as they get that refresh, he just tarps and makes some extra space, make sure they're completely safe, and also make sure now, because there's still 3 more moving zones after this one, they are really towards the front side of the zone, exactly like before, playing high layers. Very, very good stuff by him. And these guys start thinking about the win condition. Whenever you get a refresh in in-game, guys, always think about what is height doing, you know, how is height looking, and they realize that if they just grief out height over and over here, it's going to really help their chances of winning. At this point in the game, these guys get a very awkward moving zone pull. I'll go into drone 3 just so you can see how sort of weird this is for them. So they're right here in this little 2x1, a little bit deeper in zones. They've got more time to think about what to do. Very, very good stuff. And it ends up pulling like diagonally through all these old builds, through a load of, you know, weird layers that people are playing. And it's going to be a very, very tough rotate. And probably what a worse team would try to do here is either layer change down and put themselves in a really busy spot too early in the game, or they would layer change up, right? And they'd run into, you know, this team right here as well as this team right here, and they'd probably die, or at least one of them would die in that spot. But these guys do such a smart rotate. Malibuca realizes, oh, it's an awkward zone pull. Let me heal up first of all. It's an awkward zone pull. We can't really go through here. There's way too much going on. Let's go back around the other way and use the dead side of zones. If we zoom in on the map real quickly here, you can see there's a complete dead side right here where there's nobody at, basically where the zone just pulled far into. So zone pulled like this. See, and that's why the dead side is over there. And these guys are now going to wrap through that dead side in, you know, a nice high layer, and it's going to be pretty good on mats. You can see they block this team off with a stair like that. They rotate very, very freely. Of course, they're going to get griefed by the Rusty Blaster. And now you can see how much freer this rotate has been. Rather than running through all this congestion, they realize where the dead side is and how they can use it to their advantage, and they're able to rotate and not use too many mats at all. At this point in time, I really like how they start playing, you know, a lower layer at this point in time. Main reason being is you can try to find a refresh on a lower layer a little bit easier, as well as a big thing in endgames is you can just refarm trees. Like refarming trees at this point in time is so good because each one gives you like a ridiculous amount of mats. Like Vico right there got like 70 wood just from that one tree, and of course now they're in a much more congested spot. They've got double edits above and below where they can actually try to find a refresh on, and of course they can do these little diagonal drop downs. Vico does one right here onto Charlie Gunner, because you can see gets him into the full box, and just like that, these guys are very, very stacked. And of course they don't just, you know, sit in a single box edge of zone. They get even further in, they claim extra space, getting a little bit deeper, because of course every single moving zone is now 5 moving zones. You need to be a little bit ahead of other teams. So even if zone was to pull, you know, back here, which it ends up doing, they still got this extra little box that they can use for, you know, scouting and figuring out what's going on, as well as to figure out, you know, just refarming the trees is so good at this point in time. And again, all of these little extra places, extra boxes that they're building allow them to stay ahead of other teams instantly and potentially get even more refreshes and just keep chaining together refreshes. Again, as you can see, Malibuca is doing exactly as he did before. He's getting all the way front side, and he's going to start thinking about potentially a height take, as you can see. And what do you do when you want to go for height? As well, first of all, you need to prep it. You need to chop it out a bunch. You need to grief the height team's mats. You don't want to be going up for height when the height team is, capped in metal, when they're building really strong mats, and you can't really get damaged. You want to try to get a little bit of damage advantage, and also just grief the height team's mats. So when you eventually go up for it, it's going to be much more free. That's exactly what they do. They chop out height a bunch of times and now tarp even further into zone, and they're going to go for a very, very standard height flank. You guys should know about this play by now. That is genuinely one of the best plays that you can do in an endgame. It's just flanking height, especially when you grief them really hard. Up on height right here, we've got my boys June and Kobe from the masterclass that was playing the masterclass customs that we host, as you can see, and these guys just have nothing left, right? They're decent on heals, they're playing tack only, right? But they just got no mats because Malibuca and Vico have been griefing them over and over. And of course, these guys are able to ramp up completely for free. They take high ground just like that, turn around, little max, and just like that, June and Kobe go down, and these guys are left up on high ground. Thing is though, taking high at this point in time doesn't really mean much because there's still so long of the game to go. There's still like another whole moving zone. Normally this would just be the end of the game. There is still another whole moving zone. So Malibuca does a nice play. He doubles backs and splashes up with Vico, and these guys are going to start layering down. Unfortunately for Malibuca right here, as he goes down, he gets hit with a little max, as you can see, goes down, and now Vico is left up into the solo clutch. And I actually really like how he plays this solo clutch, so let's break this down. Now the first step of this solo clutch by Vico is really, really smart, as he sort of just abandons Malibuca and lets him go off and fight on his own, and instead he prioritizes getting these siphon mats that are down here on Not Body in Storm, and he gets those mats and immediately gets in Storm and just plays time for a second. It's so important in these scenarios not to rush, taking the fight down to the player on the low ground, because he has no idea, what the HP is, what the mats are like on this other player. You can see the guy's 200 HP. It's not a good fight to take. And instead, he just plays time for a second. He knows there's another solo somewhere in the lobby, probably playing back in Storm, and he wants that other solo, which in this case is Fredoxy, to come into circle right here, which is exactly what happens. As you can see, other player comes in, played down on low ground, helps Vico out right here by not spraying him, as he's just playing back in Storm. Plays back in Storm. Now, Fredoxy is directly on his top. What does he do? Edit down, hits him 100, and just like that, he's able to scroll out all of the mats as well as the gold pump, which is super nice. Also all of the mats, and gets up on high ground. And now he's in high ground, still getting a siphon from that kill, and he's in a 1v1 with a small mat advantage. So important. First thing he does in this 1v1 right here is he doesn't rush. He plays his time. He knows the other player wants to try to chop him out or spray him out, whatever it is, and he just sits up on high ground and lets the other player sort of spray him, and this allows him to get a freebie, little bit of damage, and immediately blocks the angle. This other player plays it well, so he changes up the angle that he's on down on low ground. He chops out height. However, of course, whenever he chops out height, he is suddenly looking way over here, looking completely the opposite way, and Vico is falling down with his crosshair already on the other player. So it's a much easier shot for him to hit. He ends up, trading right there, and he makes the correct call right here, I think, is not swapping to the spray gun and instead just keeping out the pump. Like, he swaps the spray gun, immediately swaps back to the pump when the timing of the delay is off, and he's able to hit the shot and take out the player. It's a really important lesson in those final scenarios. Obviously, being on height is better. Also, you just need to play nice and slow and just get chip pump damage, make sure your pump's reloaded, and make sure you're confident enough to hit the shot at the final moment. Also, small little thing he did right there is he drops down in Storm, just so it's a little bit harder for the other player to see him and to track him. The guy falling into Storm always has the advantage in those scenarios, just because it's a little bit harder to see him, right? As he falls right here, it's a lot harder for this other player to hit the shot. He sort of disappears for a second down or low, and he ends up hitting the nice double pump and taking him out.